How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, Matt?
Not much, not much. Been busy, busy, busy. Thanks for holding down the fort for a couple weeks.
No worries. As our listeners may notice, me and Matt are in cyberspace right now, testing out some of our capabilities and doing a podcast over the interwebs.
Well, there's testing out capabilities out of necessity because both of our schedules were just absolutely crazy right now between me trying to pack and having just closed on the new house and just accepted an offer on the old house. It's just been a whirlwind of activity lately.
Well, you're
So,
getting ahead of yourself. You haven't even made the announcement to our listeners yet on what you did today.
yeah, I closed and I accepted an offer. So I closed on the new house. Yay. We don't move in for a little bit yet because he's active duty military and needs to stay there till his new orders kick in. So, but got a new house officially and
Yeah.
accepted an offer on our previous house that we are trying to sell so we can facilitate this.
I mean
So,
that's a bit of a weight off the shoulders. You're on the last leg of the race.
yeah. Now it's just packing up the rest of our stuff and moving it in a little bit here, like in the next like 10 to 14 days, and then hopefully closing on this one by like late mid November and getting rid of that to be just solely committed to the new. Yeah, exciting times.
There you go. There you go.
Stressful times. Exciting and stressful. It's a real run of emotions,
You'll find that
honestly.
life steps always are usually exciting and stressful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Inexpensive.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. The expensives are given and more money than I've ever spent in my life. So
Cool. Yeah. So this week I had the pleasure of going. Well, it's not always a great moment, but it's always an honor to go to. I had a Masonic funeral that we had for
mhm.
one of our brethren. Good turnout. I did have to do the Lodge of Sorrows, which I was surprised I had to do, but it was still a kind of a great ceremony. And our brother Dave, worshipful brother Dave at Lodge, did a great ceremony. You know, it's weird because I've been to probably more funerals than I've ever imagined as a Freemason. I've been to like 9.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I've been to my fair share of a few. Unfortunately couldn't make this one because with the open houses and everything going on this weekend, we just decided to get get out of town and let the realtor, have the house to show whenever he wanted to. So that was unfortunately, because we had a good time, but we were up north. So,
Yeah, it was fun. So
but
it got me thinking, though, that today's topic is going to be talking about Masonic funerals, a fun and light
yeah,
topic.
right. Yeah, sure. Super fun and light topic. I mean, there is a lot of things that go into them that make them impressive, I think would be the right word.
or
Obviously, there's still a solemn occasion. But,
or important would be another word I would use too. But yeah, they're not a hoot, but they are kind of important. So cool. I'll kick the music
for
and we'll
sure.
get started.
Loosen up your ties and roll up your sleeves. It's time for fellowship with Matt and Andrew. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin or any other Grand Lodge or any appended body.
All right. So Masonic funerals, the last rite of a Master Mason. Kind of a big
Right.
deal. Did I tell you?
It,
I didn't get to mention it. So, you know how we had a Master Mason on Thursday?
mhm.
When the newest Master Mason was sitting next to me after receiving the degree, Jason, I leaned over and said, "You want to go to a funeral on Saturday?" And he was
You
there.
would.
He was there. It's a
Oh,
good,
awesome.
I think it's a good moment for a Master Mason to kind of, when he's right at the start of his Masonic journey, to also see the end. So the book caps. But I remember the first Masonic funeral I went to, I was probably only a Master Mason for a couple of months. Maybe 1 or 2 months, I think. It was before, I forget who it was that passed. But yeah, it was shortly after. And I thought the topic within the funeral rites and the Lodge of Sorrow all had a lot of very interesting philosophical points to remind the living, as well as great ways to honor the brother who's passed away.
I would agree. I mean, I went to my first one not long after becoming a master mason as well, and it was an experience for sure to see how the brothers come out for brother that's laid down his working tools, and just the reverence with which the occasion is treated, and how it's more so of a we'll see you later than a goodbye.
It's definitely more of a I'll see you later than a goodbye, but it's also like a lot of it is a heavy reminder to the living too. A lot of the topics within it are dealing with a lot of it's directed to the brethren in attendance. I noticed there's a lot of memento mori stuff going on within the ceremony, and a lot of the stuff is kind of it's very reminiscent of the Master Mason degree, where it's kind of philosophizing about death, and in its own unique Masonic way.
But yeah, I mean, death is a central theme to Freemasonry, so it would only make sense that we, take the occasion upon which somebody passes and use it as an opportunity to pay our respects to the fallen brother, but also use it as an opportunity to reinforce the lessons and remind everybody that, one day that'll be you as well. So do with your time what you can.
Yeah, and so one thing that stuck out to me, so for our listeners, some are maybe have never attended a Masonic funeral, some I'm sure have. For at least within our jurisdiction, the way that it's kind of broken down is to kind of walk you through the experience. In Wisconsin, we are able to open what's called a Lodge of Sorrow. And the Lodge of Sorrow is basically a very small impromptu ritual that we basically just open a Lodge of Sorrow that has a little bit of a couple of blurbs kind of talking about why we're here, why this is important, why this is our duty, and kind of it makes it feel like a more serious situation, kind of what we're about to undertake on sending this brother off. And I think it's kind of cool that it kind of aligns you with that mindset, being like, hey, this is serious. We need to do the best for this brother as his last hurrah, his last send off, to give him a proper go.
Right, agreed. And not to plug something else here, but recently when I was that other Masonic podcast, you guys should go check out that episode, by the way, it's their most recent one. We talked about Masonic funerals a little bit and lodges of sorrows, and I found it interesting that in Indiana, they open a Lodge of Sorrow at installation at the beginning of the year, and it stays open all the way until the end of the year, and then they close it. Because the way theirs is written is they used to have to go to the lodge to open a Lodge of Sorrow, then go to the funeral home, then go back to the lodge to close it. So this was the workaround that they came up with, is they just open one at the beginning of the year, it stays open all year, and then they conduct Masonic funerals as necessary. So I thought that it's just a fun little tidbit of jurisdictional differences.
Yeah, I was listening to that. I thought that was kind of interesting too, because I never really realized that, it's possible that some jurisdictions would, I guess it's hard to say, because I'm assuming that some of the ceremonies could be more intense than others too. And in a situation that you need an entire lodge room to do it, I would assume there's probably I'd probably say some stuff that you would want to keep, a little more veiled. So you wouldn't want to be like, hey, we can't be doing certain parts of our ritual in a funeral home. And so I would assume then that's why they would say, hey, we'll do we'll do the whole ordeal like Grand Lodge, and then we'll close it later or whatever it might be. But yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a hassle.
Right. Yeah, when they were explaining that to me, I was kind of like, wow, that's crazy. We can just open it right up at the funeral home. Obviously, we go into a private room to open up the Lodge of Sorrows, and then the rest of the ceremony is public. But yeah, we can kind of go do it where we need to do it. So I find those little jurisdictional quirks different, but interesting. But it speaks to what you were just talking about. Something about being able to open the Lodge of Sorrows at the funeral home reminds you of the seriousness of the task you're about to undertake, right? And I feel like you're kind of missing something if you don't do it there right beforehand, and there's just one that's open all year, because it's good to serve as that reminder to the brothers that are about to attend the ceremony that, hey, this is serious, this is a solemn occasion, and we need to go into it with that attitude.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that it was a nice setup. So you even sign a minute book at the Lodge of Sorrow, and you usually will stick the obituary right in there so that anyone looking through can see more information about that past brother and all that kind of good stuff. A couple of things that stuck out to me was it's like the symbols that we use really come to fruition at a funeral. And honestly, sometimes what's interesting too is a Masonic funeral might be the first time that anyone in the public gets to even hear about Masonry, which is not really the best time to hear about Masonry, but to a certain extent it kind of is. When you see 30, 40 guys show up for your relative being like, this was important to him and he was important to us. And kind of explaining, especially the generation like Brother Leo who passed, his generation, they were a little bit more reserved about talking about Masonry. So that might be the first time they even understand what their grandfather was doing, like what was important to him. And it's, it tells them about, being moral and being selfless and being an upright man. And I think that gives an interesting perspective to the public as well.
Well, and I agree. And that kind of harkens back to what I was saying earlier when I said, like, it's an impressive ceremony. And it's impressive because of, the lessons and the words and the love contained within it. But it's also impressive because now all of a sudden you got all these guys show up who knew your relative who maybe you've never even known about, or maybe you didn't know he was a Freemason. I mean, I've already heard stories of guys who ended up joining the fraternity because, or weren't active and then became active again because of Masonic funerals and being in attendance at one and being like, holy cow, like, that's what this is all about. Like, that's something I want to be a part of.
Well, and I remember, I think they were talking, I was having a conversation at the funeral with Brother Matt Adrian, who was on 2 episodes ago, and he was telling Brother Jason, the newest MM, about the book, The Better Natures of Our Angels, or whatever that popular Civil War book was. And what's interesting is he's talking about how so many people wanted to join just so they could get that funeral right at their funeral if they were to inevitably pass in the conflict, because they thought it was such a cool ceremony to have added onto a funeral if they were unfortunately to pass. And it's interesting because...
Well, just let me tack on one thing there. And unfortunately, because of all the craziness of the Civil War, it was one way for them to ensure that they were going to get a proper burial.
I mean, that makes a great point, too. Otherwise, you didn't know.
You weren't always guaranteed that in that war, but if there was, and there was, Masons on both sides, and they knew it was a Mason, they were going to see to the fact that he got a proper burial.
Well, I mean, you can see why, then you can understand why, especially in the Civil War, where like the handling of returning bodies home is a little more complicated logistically. Right. Nowadays they got it down pretty well if they can. But like back in the day, you'd be like, yeah, I'm far from home. Who's gonna keep tabs on me? Like if I do pass. And it makes sense to say like, hey, at least I know that the brothers will make sure either A, the body gets returned to my home so I can be buried with my family, or B, that I get a decent funeral. I mean, I think it's an interesting thought to be like, hey man, I just want to have a cool funeral when I die. Is that okay? But I mean, I think it's important to people too,
I mean, it is important to people. I've always had mixed emotions about funerals. They are some of the most uncomfortable things that you can go to, and they can also be, a great celebration of life and reminiscing about the person that you're there for, and it's interesting how they're so solemn yet so joyful at times. And, I struggle with them sometimes. I mainly struggle with, I'll be honest, but I mainly struggle with open caskets. I've never really been a huge fan of that. Those kind of, I don't know why. It just feels like the person isn't there anymore when I look at them. So I've never cared for those.
I always have a weird thing with open caskets, but it's weird on the opposite end where like they don't bug me that much. So like I've gone in and like readjusted their pocket squares and been like, oh, that's not right. And just like fix it up. And people are like, can you stop touching the bodies? And I'm like, it's not right, dude. It's got to be fixed. I've snuck pennies in their pockets just in case there's a ferryman. I'm like, you can't leave them without their pennies just in case. So,
honestly, just because of some of the stories I know about you and like inappropriately grabbing jewelry on people and stuff, living people and stuff like that, like to tell them a story about it and various other things, that doesn't surprise me whatsoever.
Well, when I was in college working in the bone lab in my anthropology department, just handling bones all day, I feel like you get a little less. I mean, I don't like, it's just touching their clothes a little bit, just trying to fix them up.
Right.
But,
right. No, I get that. I worked in a hospital for a long time. I would sign body releases and do stuff like that. But it's different when it was somebody you knew, like, and you're seeing it, and it's just like that. Even with like the heavy makeup on sometimes and stuff, I'm just like, that's not the person I knew. Like, they're not there anymore.
I guess for me, I kind of treat it similar to if I would go up to my relative's gravesite and spruce it up a little bit, where I go, I know it's not them anymore. And so it's kind of just like you're trying to be like, hey, I want like the remaining thing left behind to be in good, proper form and look nice. So like it doesn't bug me as much.
Right. No, I hear you and I get that. But we got down a different rabbit hole there, and that's all my fault. But we should realign here. So you got a Lodge of Sorrows open, and then it comes time for the Masonic service, and I will let you take it from there because you have been at one of the most recent.
Yep. So the Masonic service is nice, where we traditionally, this is a role of the chaplain. At our lodge, we've had a couple of brothers who have always kind of felt the calling to do them. So we had our secretary go and do it. He's done them a handful of times, and he likes doing them. I mean, likes as much as one could like. He considers it an honor. Yep. And so there's a lengthy bit within it kind of talking about what Freemasonry is, a little bit about like the virtues of the brother, and then there's a variety of prayers, so kind of like you'd imagine a classic service. And then the kind of after it goes through all these symbols, and I would argue that the service itself is very poetically done. It's kind of emotional, even though like the last two funerals, including this one, I think that I met Brother Leo, I think maybe twice. He was pretty well up there when I joined, so he wasn't able to always attend. So I think I've only met him maybe one or two times. But it's still kind of emotional, just especially when I hear the stories from their family members about him, that he kind of becomes very personal. But so after I don't know what to call it, the service itself, the brethren line up and we have evergreens in our pockets, right? And so these are, I think for us, we use cedar, but they could be, I believe my understanding is any evergreen, which is symbolic of the sprig of acacia, which for Masons is a symbol of immortality because evergreens never, they never lose their leaves in the winter. So that's kind of the symbol. And you lay it on the casket. Well, actually, the white apron is laid out, which is that's a symbol for purity, innocence, upright conduct, a moral life. So you lay the symbol of a moral life on him, saying, implying he's lived a moral life. And then you lay in turn, you all go down and lay the sprig of acacia, as a symbol of the hope for immortality. And then kind of for me, the most impactful moment outside of the laying of the sprig is you step back and you gesture upward with your hands as like a final salute. And then you put your hands on your heart to salute that his soul has gone to the afterlife, but you contain it within your heart. You contain his memory within your heart, and then you walk away, and every brother has to go through and do that as a kind of like a last respect.
Right. Yeah, definitely a showing of final respects and, saying see you later.
And it's also reinforcing your beliefs in, what happens after death. It's kind of trying to reinforce with yourself and with the family, like, hey, though he's no longer here, he's still living within us, and he lived a good and upright life as a good man. So we'll never forget him. But we have hope that when the soul leaves the body, that it's not the end and that there is life after death. And then we move on.
Right. Exactly. And, going back to the evergreen, whether it be an acacia or not, it's supposed to represent the acacia and the fact that they never go dormant. They never, whatever. They're always green and alive is, symbolic of that fact that we feel like that's what happens with the soul. Like it moves on and we're going to, God willing, run into each other again.
Yep. So, well, and I think after leaving the service and stuff, I start to notice I think a lot of the goals of it are when there's a death in the family, and that could be including your Masonic family, a brother passes. The proper thing to do at closure is for the friends to come together and support each other in the time of grief. And it's also a way for the lodge to try to give some support to the family who's, in often cases are grieving way harder than everyone who might be in attendance at the Masonic funeral service. But it's a way to kind of show that support and be like, hey, you're not alone. We're here with you. And try to give some words of encouragement as well. And to kind of show last honors to the family that that their loved one mattered and that it was important and that they were important to us. And I think that's kind of a powerful thing to do as a way to respect a past brother.
Well, and that he was part of something bigger than himself, right? Like, and that he wanted to see his community get better, and he wanted to do all those kinds of things. And maybe he didn't talk about it enough, but I feel like Leo was a guy that probably talked about it. But a lot of guys, especially from that generation, didn't talk about it enough. So, I think we alluded to this earlier. It's sometimes shocking for the family. All of a sudden, he's having a Masonic service, and there's a bunch of Masons there, and they had no clue he even was one until they stumbled across his ring in the house after he passed away, or until they see all these Masons at a service. And I think that gives them comfort to know that there were a lot of people that cared about him, and that he was part of something that was trying to improve his community, and that he was constantly working to improve himself and things like that. So
yeah,
I think it hits on multiple levels.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And I think this funeral hit me a little harder because we were, as a lodge, so informed on his entire process, which we should be. But
Right.
between our brother, worshipful brother Jeff, helping drive his wife Dorothy to the hospital to visit him through the process, giving us constant update, it was on our minds for a long time. And so some of these funerals I've had, it's a guy who's been living in Florida for 25 years. He's passed, or, you never know. Like, it's someone that it kind of seems like it's like, whoa, okay. And then you go to give respects just because he's a brother. But there's something about when you are more kind of present the entire time that there's a stronger connection to it, which kind of made it hard for me to go to it. It was a very sad thing. And it's important to feel that too for a brother, but it was one of those ones that you go, man, I'd like to see some of these brothers more but not at a funeral. You know what I mean? Like, it's nice that we all come together, right. But it's tough that, we have to all kind of go and send a brother off too.
Right. And, with this one, we were talking about somebody who was well respected, had done a lot, and was very active up until he couldn't be anymore. And I think from what you've told me about the turnout, it was pretty impressive, and I think that shows that a lot of people cared about Leo, and all of us were there, offering to pitch in towards the end. I mean, worshipful brother Jeff took the brunt of it, because sometimes our work hours didn't work out with taking her to the hospital and stuff like that to see him, and I know we were trying to organize going and seeing him before he passed on, but then, various things happened, and we were unable to make that happen, which I think Leo would have really appreciated that, but at least we got to do his Masonic service and, send him off in a Masonic way.
No, I agree. And it was nice. It's always a bittersweet. And I had some really good conversations with some brethren talking about, especially to our newest Master Mason, about how it is a duty incumbent on all Masons to try to make sure, if available within the length of the cable tow, to attend Masonic funerals. I think I've only had 2 where I personally knew the brother, and the rest I said it doesn't matter. A brother's a brother. He's a member of our lodge. He deserves to have a good turnout. Those ones can be sad too, because you're like, man, I wish I would have got to know this guy. You hear all these cool stories about some, badass guy, and you're like, dang, I wish I would have met him. But it's kind of a duty incumbent on Masons to say that it's part of your obligation to say you will. I don't know if it's specifically called out, but it feels like it's one of those the secret symbols, right? What do we call those? I
think it's an unspoken thing, an unwritten rule that, you should, whenever possible, whether you knew the brother or not, you should be in attendance at a Masonic funeral if he's getting a Masonic service. I feel like it's just what everybody in this fraternity is owed, and I think it's something we don't really talk about, not written down anywhere, but that's the way we think about it,
Yep. I mean, and if it's someone nearby and you get wind of it and he's a brother, but he wasn't a member of your lodge, you've never met him, then that's a nice to do. But when it's a member of your lodge, it's a you should do. And I think within that, there's something important, because I think one of the lessons of Masonry being that we have a finite life, and that we must always remember that, our hourglass is running and that we have limited time. There's nothing that reminds you more of, one, the impact Masonry has when you can see, how much love a brother had within their family and their friends and their lodge and all the stuff they've done in their communities and all the stuff that you'll hear about at funerals. It's also like a strong reminder to yourself to be like, hey, someday you'll be receiving a Masonic funeral. What are you going to do with the time you're given? Which I think is important as Masons to always remember that the hourglass the sand in the hourglass is always passing by, and it's almost, you can't even see it. It passes sometimes slowly, but in the space of a small period of time, it feels like it passes quickly. And then you say, don't forget, don't waste time. You're only given so much.
On the other end of the spectrum, hey, do I get a hug before you go to bed? The more so the beginnings of life right here that needs to go to bed.
For the listeners, he's hugging his daughter. I can guess it.
Yep, it's bedtime for the little one. She's got preschool tomorrow, so but it's fun doing it at home. In the process of moving right now, and I don't really have a quiet space to go to at the moment because there's no furniture and there's no creates a interesting dynamic in the household at the moment.
Cool. Well, did you have anything else you want to add about Masonic funerals? Otherwise, I think, we could give our last thoughts as well.
I think we're in a good place with what we've brought up so far. I mean, they while beautiful, I think they're better experienced than talked about. And I think the stuff we have talked about and covered with them has been pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I guess my last takeaway would be that you should attend Masonic funerals for the brethren of your lodge if available to you. They're not only comforting for the family, we only do them when requested. So if it's requested, it is the job of the lodge to provide it. And you should show up to not only give your last respects, but there's also something really impactful about the ceremony that impacts the living as well as honors the fallen brother who's hung up their working tools. So definitely something that can be kind of, I would say, there's a lot of things that we do in Masonry that are jovial and fun, but there's some things that we do are solemn and serious, and this would be one of those things. But it's important, and I've never regretted a single Masonic funeral I've went to.
Neither have I, and I would echo your thoughts because you probably said it more eloquently than I could. I totally agree, and they're important. Anytime you can go and you know of one, you should be going. And if the family requested it, that's because Masonry meant a lot to that brother, and that's how he had expressed to his family that he wanted to be sent off. So it's out of respect for him and love for him, that's what you need to go do.
Cool. I agree. Well, anyways, we will get back to news and events once me and Matt's life gets back in order, since it's a little chaotic and I'm on a microphone.
Hopefully soon. Hopefully we'll actually be able to sit down and record one together this upcoming weekend. I don't have anything on my calendar right now, so I'm thinking we might be able to pull it off. The following weekend's the move, which I think we could actually do a dynamic episode with because so many of you brothers are coming to help do the move. We could probably have a little fun and roll the two things in together.
That could be an interesting one. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Always feel free to share and get the word out. Make sure you're following us if you have not so yet on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok. Following us helps get the word out there. And otherwise, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for listening as always, and have a great day.
Bye.